Hey man, welcome to the show.
Jace, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome. Awesome to have you on. You've always been one of my favorite people to talk shop. Like even when we were at Get Fast, like our first arguments about bench press range of motion, because I've got these long arms and you've got short arms. Uh, but
No,
but it, go ahead.
no, sorry, no. It's like you start off with like just those like small, you think, which are big topics, which lead into like deeper rabbit holes, and the topics just get crazier and crazier from there.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Um, so we started together at Get Fast. You were the intern group after my summer intern group, and honestly, your guys' intern group was way better than my intern group. But I remember one of the first things I think Matt was showing you guys around. It was like orientation day. It was you and Brandy and Jordan and Graham and everyone. I think it was all four or five of you. Um, you were at the plow board, and Matt's like line was uh, stick with the simple stuff first and then get complicated. And then you said something like, glad you said that because my mind was going nuts. I was about to get real crazy. Something like that. So you've always been kind of like trying to take stuff to the next level, and that was like my first impression of you.
And I'll tell you right now, that hasn't changed. It's still going 100 miles an hour in a bunch of different directions.
It keeps it fresh, right? It's better than doing the same boring thing. Squat 5x5 is cool, but it's also boring, right?
Yep, yep. How can we make it better?
Awesome. Yeah. So I wanted to cover a couple topics with you because you're one of the only strength coaches I've got to work with who went to the college sector and has really stuck it out. Going from the private sector to the college sector and like done a really great job. You bounce around a little bit, but that's kind of expected in a college strength and conditioning world. But you've been with it, you stuck with it. It's obviously something you really enjoy doing. So could you speak a little bit to your transition from a small private performance gym to working as an intern at Colorado State, and then at Castleton and Trinity, all those stops you've had along the way?
Yeah. So the transition, it was different but challenging but fun at the same time. Coming from the private sector, you're working in a lot smaller groups. So I think this is the one thing I really took away from the private sector and working at a small training facility as opposed to like a big school with a bunch of teams, was how to interact with athletes, how to talk with athletes. Because everyone says like, oh, in the college setting, it's big group training, which it is. But at the same time, in that big group setting, you have to learn how to connect with every athlete. And I think that's where the private sector really honed my skills for about the year and a half I was there. It was like, okay, I'm in a small group setting. I can have anywhere from 1 to 8 athletes at a time. And if you're working one-on-one, if you're quiet the entire time, you're not being the best at getting to know who your athletes were. So I think that's what really allowed me to have an easier transition, because I had those skills of like, hey, what's up? How are you? What sport do you play? Where are you from? What high school did you go to? Like building a connection more than just how much weight do you want to do, the speed stuff like that. You're really getting to know the person. So that's the one thing that really helped me going into a larger team setting. So, okay, I can't communicate with everybody at once. Let's just start with the small position groups I was assigned to train with. And then from there, I can move on to kind of everybody else and get to know everyone as a whole.
Right. And I think that's something I struggled with when I started to Get Fast, was I'm just like very introverted by nature. So I didn't want to, like, I had a hard time even getting to know people's names, but you were always very extroverted. Like I said, that day one, you were like talking and you had no issue, really getting to know. And I'm sure, new environment, you're nervous. And I'm sure you kind of felt that when you went to these bigger groups, but you kind of alluded to it, especially at bigger schools. There's one head strength and conditioning coach, for, like a big program like football, let's take Colorado State, but you've got a lot of assistant or interns or graduate assistantships. So you're generally working with smaller groups within the bigger aspect of the team, correct?
Yeah. So like you can have smaller training groups that could be anywhere from 10 to 30 people, 40 people, depending on how big your weight room was. so like that kind of small private sector was there, but there were still like larger groups that, you if you just stay in one corner of the weight room, wherever you're at, and you're talking with those people, it's like, all right, you have to be able to expand to a bunch of different personalities and and people as well.
Right. So talking about the personalities, have you like do you stay Hyde the whole time, or do you kind of switch to meet the wide receivers or the volleyball players, or like are you kind of just like firmly yourself? Because you see
Oh,
these
yeah,
strength and
yeah.
conditioning coaches like at Northwestern, great strength and conditioning coach, but he's like this, kind of he's very colorful, facial expression, get real hype, stuff like that. But do you stay kind of like who you are, or do you change based on kind of who you're dealing with?
No, you stay who you are. I mean, that's like student athletes are people too, and like they can spot when people are being fake, not being real. And like for me, like each team does have their own kind of culture, their personality to it. So like one team like might be enjoying being like hyped up a little bit more. Other teams like, hey, back off a little bit more. I don't like being yelled at when I got a bar on my back. I need to focus, like stuff along those lines. So it's you're still getting me. You're still getting. I like being outgoing. I like asking questions. I like having fun. But it's to what your team culture is, because in college athletics, it's like I want my teams to have the most fun while we're in that weight room. So if whatever I can do to supplement them having fun, like I'm all for it. And I think that's just kind of who I am too, because you go places where you don't have fun. It's like I don't want to be there, and I want to be the person to help create that fun atmosphere in the room. So I think that's just kind of who I am, I guess. So it's like I just stay me, and I adapt to like how can I make this situation better for everybody.
Yeah, I think you did a great job with that. Even after you left Gift Fest, people talked about how fun you were. Like the athletes, just like, man, Hyde was always so much fun. And I would like take that as like a shot. Like I'm fun too, guys. We're different fun, but whatever. So kind of going off of that, So what are the top lessons you took from private to college, or from one college to the next? Trying to bring fun into the weight room, because really it is a job for these student athletes. Like they've got to treat it like a 9 to 5. You got to get in, put in your work, go to meals, meetings, study and stuff like that. So bringing the fun, seems to me like one of the main lessons. What are other lessons you've found that travel well with you?
Um, it's kind of like I hate to say like fun again, but like creating an experience that the athletes won't forget, because not everybody comes into college, comes into whatever environment they want to be, like wanting to lift weights and wanting to train and be pushed out of their comfort zone. So if you can support, I think the place I took on each one I've been was like, hey, like I'm here for you. I want to make everybody around you better. I want to make you better. And I really kind of show just kind of how much I care and how much I want to like make the weight room something that they look forward to when they look in the room and say, hey, what's up? Like I want them to be themselves. I don't want to be the person who's like, everything is done my way, this way. If we don't do it this way, then it's wrong. It's like, hey, come in here, be fun. And that's the one thing I've noticed from every stop was each coach kind of there's like just a different twist on how to bring the fun. And that's something I've taken from each stop is, okay, when I was here, athletes like this, I'm going to bring it over to another school where I'm at and see if it works. And if it doesn't, all right, I got to adapt and learn. So I think creating the environment for your athletes is it's got to be number one. It's got to be, to me, it's got to be number one. Creating a place where they want to be and they want to have fun and they want to train and they want to push each other. It makes your job fun. It makes their lives fun, and it makes them want to come back.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that's something, we tried to do at Give Fest as well when we were there, right? That's why, we didn't have athletes. It's not like when an athlete signed up, they were with us. Like we created new environments based on, if we had a group of college athletes, that environment's going to be a little bit different than if we have like a wide range of group, starting with, a 10-year-old, up to maybe a 15-year-old. it's going to be a little bit different. You got to, as a strength coach, it's important, I think, to be able to mold to those groups and working with different teams. You've worked with a women's lacrosse team. You've also worked with a football team. Like you can't treat those environments necessarily the same, you know?
It's no, you hold everyone to the same standard of, rules. Like, this is how we operate within the weight room. You put your plates back where you get them, you reset the bar, you make sure you wipe everything down. Like, you have those standards of like, hey, make sure you have the right shirt on, make sure you have the school colors on, all like the standards that you set.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's like, okay, how can we make this atmosphere more fun, whether it's through music, whether it's through some type of competition, whether it's through an athlete saying a couple words before the lift or something along those lines, where it's different. You get the athletes kind of creating that message and creating that culture, and then you just kind of make sure it stays within the standards of everything.
I like what you said there, because so you can keep the same excellence for everyone, right? The same we demand the best out of our athletes. Whether it's doing things the right way. So like we had a rule when I was in college, baseball team, everyone loved baseball hats, but our coach absolutely did not allow us to wear hats inside buildings. And he had spies around campus. If he caught us wearing hats inside the building, first infraction is running, second infraction, you miss a game. Like, so, keeping those standards of excellence. Yeah, that was pretty harsh, but you do it one time, all of a sudden you're never going to do it again.
Okay.
But keeping those, but also you alluded to having the athletes drive their own environment. So you may set it week 1, week 2, but then you expect, maybe your captains or the leaders in the weight room, the people the freshmen look up to say, hey, this is the way we do things. And you're just kind of there to facilitate, making sure the environment doesn't drop, making sure the energy doesn't go down. Like that? Did I kind of get that right?
No, exactly. And it's like each team, like I think like giving control, like, hey, you can go pick a stage if we're doing like a team lift or something like that. Hey, go pick the music. And it's something that's very out there. But if it gets that team going, like, hey, I'm all for it. I'm bought in. Like, I see people are having a good time, encouraging each other. Some people are dancing a little bit. As long as they're staying on focus, safety's there. We're getting our task at the task that we need to get through that day done. Like, I'm all for it.
Yeah, and that, like, so something like music is a really small thing. Not everyone gets hyped to the same songs. Like, not everyone needs the screaming hate yourself music. Not everyone wants classic Kanye. Some people want to bump Taylor Swift's new album. Some people want to play Logic. Some people want dubstep. But allowing that kind of freedom to your team, I think, allows them to buy into you as a coach, right? So now they're going to trust you. Hey, we do our work. Coach Hyde is going to let us, kind of have this little bit of freedom. Or Coach, DeLongis at the school you're at now, or wherever it may be, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you got to make sure like kids aren't going up there like looking at the computer, searching for songs, hitting next. It's like, okay, hey, we're going to pick one station. If not everybody agrees on it, we can pick another, but that's it. Don't be hitting next. Like, we got stuff to do. We can get through it with this. So, again, it comes to, having a standard set. How can I hold this standard and then create what the athletes want in the weight room at the same time without dropping below that standard?
That's awesome. Yeah, awesome. I'm just like picturing the Matt Hyde weight room in the college setting, and I'm like kind of getting fired up. Like, I've got some goosebumps. I mean, I remember when we lifted together at Give Fast. Maybe we weren't doing the same things, but like I felt like I was always getting stronger when we did when it was all the trainers there lifting together. We had a better environment. Maybe
that's another thing. Sorry to kind of cut you off there. Like, this is, I think, what I love about Trinity and Coach DeLongis is like he shuts down the weight room from 12 to 2, and we lift as a staff. And I think that's just key. Something about lifting with your teammates, like your coworkers, whatever, lifting with them, pushing each other is, I think, something that every school or every strength and conditioning department private sector, whatever you're at, I think that should be like a standard for you, because the things like I've learned from just, talking with coach while in between sets, or spotting or pushing, or really getting to know some of the interns that you have, like through that lifting time, I think it's key. Like that's something that when he said on the phone call, when I was interviewing, he's like, yeah, we shut down the weight room from 12 to 2. And then usually after our day, we go to when my position would have a free meal, we'd have a meal together too. So I think those things right there, like just as a staff, like connect you guys, make you better, build trust, and you learn. And I think that's something that should be like necessary across the board with a lot of private sectors or strength and conditioning.
Hey, man, I agree. Like something about sweating together, just getting through, even if you're not doing the same workouts, like you've got squats, I've got bench or whatever, getting through that stuff together, just builds a little bit closer knit. And I would take that even further. Like I think, more corporate environment jobs, should do stuff like that. Like you've got gyms in the building, block out hour-long segments, whatever, because you're going to build that tighter bond, when okay, I've got to get up at 5 to go do it, but I know Jim's going to do it too. And if I skip, he's going to give me a bunch of heck about it.
You could definitely introduce that, like the corporate level, like corporate fitness is like, okay, hey, like the accounting department, or like mix up departments and be like, hey, you guys are going down and you're going to be training together through different levels, or however you want to organize the lift, but like getting like people from different departments coming down and exercising together, I think like would take it to a whole new level of not just meeting people, but trusting people, getting to know each other, and like, oh wow, like this person's smart. I never knew what this person knew. I want to talk to them more.
Right.
The benefits are endless.
Yeah, through the roof. All right, let's shift gears a little bit. We talked about, kind of your transition from private to college, to other colleges, and what you found you've tried to use, stuff like that. Do you have any advice for a trainer? So someone who's just getting into the industry, looking at a private sector or the college sector, or someone looking to make the transition like you did from private, over to college?
To get your foot in the door, like you have to intern, you have to accept the fact that you're going to work for free. And I remember when I was talking to some coaches, like, hey, how'd you get into this spot? Like, it's like, oh, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And I was like, hey, like how true is that? Until you intern. Like when I first, even at Get Fast, I was like, yo, this could be like a career. Like every time I went there, it was like, I never felt like I was working. You look at the clock and be like, oh shoot, we got 1 hour left. There's one group left. And I think that's key too. Like if you don't love what you do, it makes it that much harder. And that's just starting through an internship. And it's a great way to know, like, okay, hey, is this for me or is this not for me? The second thing I would do, and I kind of hate myself for it, I kick myself in the butt for it, is I wish I started reading more. In college, I read what I needed to read, and I was done. Any course that was like, all right, read this article, read this, it's like, okay, I did my reading. But like even this past year, I've read, and I do audiobooks too, is like read. It's just so frustrating. Even thinking about it now, it's like, man, if I started reading as much as I did 5 years ago, I'd be through so many more books. I'd be so much further along the path than where I am now.
Yeah, I think that reading is good advice, because I'm kind of in the same boat. Like I've read way more books past, let's say, my second year at Get Fast, my second full year working. I've read more books since then than I did probably my previous 18 years of life.
100%.
You don't really realize what you're missing out on, because the fitness world. So I guess really any industry, they say once you graduate med school, 50% what you learned is obsolete, or something like that. But the fitness industry is kind of the same way. The old adage that you had to squat 2 times body weight to do plyometric work. Well, that's probably not true, because everyone's able to do a box jump. We see kids jumping around on playgrounds, technically plyometric work, stuff like that, where you can, kind of like pull, but you can expand your knowledge because it's constantly evolving, whether it's, rotator cuff, work for baseball players, or, proper speed work for football players, or whatever it may be. It's just, there's so much stuff out there, and I think you get early as an intern almost to this thought where you think you know it all, you get super confident, and then something happens, whether it's a superior, or a head coach or a trainer or whatever, kind of has to break you down, and you realize like, oh, I actually don't really know anything at all. And that's kind of where it turned on for me, as far as like the reading and the learning.
No, and that's the thing too. It's like, I'm not comparing us to like doctors or anything like that, but it's like, we do work with the human body.
Right.
We don't know everything the human body still can do. So it's like, if you're still stuck in the first thing you learned when you first started training, it's like, look how much the field's grown. Look how many more books have come out. Look how many more theories are out there. It's like, we work with the human body. Like, our job is to make it the most athletic performing individual team we can get. And like, you just even start seeing kids now coming up through like all these videos. It's like, man, those kids are athletic. It's like those kids are more athletic than I am right now at the age of 8 than I've ever been or ever will be. And it's like, okay, the body's changing. Like, how we're going to have to change how we program and scientific research or however we can get there. You got to stay always on, I don't want to say on what's coming out, but just make sure you're up to date on what's going on.
Yeah, at the very least aware.
Mm-hmm,
right.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can find studies or books or theories or whatever for or against really anything, like in any field, right? Stretching, foam rolling, dynamic, warm-ups. You can find stuff for and against, like all that stuff. But really, the answer is probably somewhere in the middle for a lot of those things. Like, I like foam rolling. It makes me feel good. Does it change my muscle composition? No. I'm not under any thoughts like that. But yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, you feel good though after. So it's like, okay, I'm ready to go. Like, something like about that spark to make sure you're ready.
Exactly. So it's, I was always of the thought that everything works, but not everything works for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I said that, when I spoke to that internship group, some people really enjoy those long static stretches. Now, am I going to have them, max out their squat after a 5-minute, hamstring hip flexor stretch? Probably not. We're going to do some activation first, to make sure none of that stuff's asleep. But if that's what gets them ready to go, I'm okay with that, type of thing. And that kind of goes back to, what you were saying earlier, whatever this team needs to feel like ready to go, hey, let's do it. But we're still going to get, I'm still going to make sure, squat form is on point, that focus is where it needs to be, that kind of everything else needs to fall into place, but you can allow those little room of freedom, whether it's recovery or preparation or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and that's the thing too that I've come to learn along the way, is through like the private sector and all the way up, is everyone's a little bit different. Like, if you need one more warm-up set, if you like this, like, I'm not going to be like, stick to the card, make sure you do that. Like, make sure you do everything on there. But if you need one more warm-up set, if you need another second over there, like, to get you ready, as long as it's not distracting and you're wasting someone's time or it's not safe, something along those lines, it's like, okay, hey, like, I get it. You need something a little bit different.
Yeah. And as long as it's not an hour stretching foam rolling routine.
Exactly.
Right. We've all seen those people, and it's like, at a point there's a diminishing returns. Like, you're just trying to take a nap, and that's fine. All right. So let's shift a little bit. Let's talk about top athletic feats you've seen. You've had the pleasure to work with a lot of, really athletic people, a lot of really high level teams. If you could list like the top 2 or 3 athletic or strength feats that you've seen, that just pop into mind.
Um, number one, I think kind of just dominates kind of everything else is I think athletes, the number one athletic features is like great athletes, like just move better. Like they're just more fluid. Because you hear it's like you hear a lot of people say, "Oh, the most athletic person on the team, the best player on the team, isn't always your best squatter." Something along those lines. They're not always the strongest person, but when they're on the field, they move. They know their body, whether they know it or not. They know how to move. They know how to get in and out of positions relatively quick. They know they can analyze a situation faster than their opponent or their teammates. And like that's what makes them a little bit better.
That's what slows the game down.
Yeah. They can slow a fast game down. Like they can process that information a lot faster and a lot more efficiently, as opposed to someone who's like processing just everything's coming in at them all at once, and they just don't know how to react. So I think that's like the number one thing I've seen is like, and I'm trying to figure out a way like how can I incorporate this into training? How can I get my athletes better in and out of cuts, better decision makers? And I think it's not all just like go and squat more, go and do this more, go weight room more. I think we have to find a way to connect the two. Because at the end of the day, like we even say it as coaches, like, hey, we're not powerlifters, we're not bodybuilders, we're not CrossFitters. It's like, yeah, we're not. We're athletes. But like somehow we still reverse to like always having to squat, always having to bench, always having to deadlift. I'm not saying that stuff's not good. It's like, how can we bring the two on-field movement patterns and weight room stuff and connect them? Because even some of the athletes, like, no, it's like, all right, like, I don't win a game with a barbell on my back. I'm like, yeah, you're kind of true.
Right.
Before like that, some athlete told me that, I'd be like, hey, that hurt my feelings a little bit. I love this, I love barbells, but now it's like, okay, like there's something to that. And how can we take that to the next level? And I'm reading a lot of the Franz Bosch Anatomy by Agility book that just came out, and it's my mind is just like expanded in terms of all the stuff that he's doing. And I'm not an expert by any means in what he's talking about. And it's like I have 1,000 questions like I would love to ask about what is going into that book and how to do it, apply it practically. But like at least my gears are starting to turn. It's like, okay, hey, I want my athletes to be the best movers possible. And I'm not talking about FMS. I'm not talking about like, passive active range of motion. I'm talking about explosive cuts, stops, getting into a posture that allows them to make the best decision possible, and move possible and be explosive possible, and being change of directions, being able to last an entire match without being with loss of fatigue and loss of performance. But I think we got to start connecting our ways and really start getting into like the athletic performance
Yeah,
side of strength and conditioning.
I think that's why you've seen this big uptick in like games,
Mm-hmm.
for reals, see react, some tag games, find the opening, stuff like that in like your agility work. It's no longer like just running the T drill or doing, shuffles on the basketball court. It's when you realize that like everything is not chaotic because it has a pattern to it
Mm-hmm.
essentially, but you've got to see, change your level and move, getting those natural movements rather than running these patterns. Like even like a football tree route, like yeah, your slant's going to be roughly the same, but it's going to be slightly different based on linebacker position, based
Mm-hmm.
on whether it's a press or an off corner. So there's a pattern to it, but it's a little bit randomized, kind of based on.
Yeah, and I think that like makes sense in my head too is like, all right, you show an athlete squatting. Okay, say like I bring an athlete into the room. I'm going to show them 2 videos. One video of a person, I'm going to ask them which one would they rather do, squat 500 pounds or put a move, if this is a wide receiver, put a move on a DB that makes the DB look foolish and gets wide open. I think they're going to lean a little bit more towards the right. Like that's the stuff they want to do. Now,
Right.
does getting up to a 500-pound squat help them? Maybe to an extent. How much of that is it? No, I don't know. But there's a lot of those quick movements and positions that they need to get into to be able to make that cut where the DB can't fully comprehend what's going on because they made a bad decision or they're not quick enough or they can't react in the position that they were in.
Right. Yeah, so let's take that and maybe the top 2 or 3 athletic things you've seen, of your athletes, whether it's, from Get Fast, whether it's from, any of your schools, any of your teams, if you like, hey, this person took everything they had and they produced in this moment, whether it's in training or a game, it doesn't have to be, one versus the other.
I want to say, and it's hard. It's the kids that they can get into a position and get out of it very fast. They're explosive. They're so quick. They're ahead. They're one step ahead of their opponents. I can't be like, the side shuffle I've seen or the vertical jump and getting a rebound. It's those positions that allow them to where they're determining their environment. They're determining what the other player has to do because they're so athletically gifted.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm super athletically gifted. I know you're going to have to do whatever I say.
Right.
As opposed to, like, if you got 2 athletically people on the same skill level going after each other, it's like, okay, hey, it's my skill versus your skill, whereas it's one person who's not as skilled. Like, the person who's skilled is going to – I'm gonna do this because I know you're going to bite. And I know I can get to we're on video, you can't really see. I'm going to take a right step, and then I know you're going to bite on this right step, and I'm going to go left before you even think what's going on. I think those are like the features that I've seen. Do
you guys incorporate stuff like that into your training, like this head-to-head competitive? So like at Get Fast, you would do, tire tug of war or, cat and mouse, with the attachment around the hip. Do you guys do any of that in like the college setting for like, the fun days? For me as an athlete, that would be a fun day.
Yeah. We try. I mean, we both of us have 8 teams. Both of us, both myself and the head strength and conditioning coach, Coach Solange, have, well over 200 athletes. So our time is limited. But right. Like, for example, with my men's lacrosse team, we go outside and we do every drill is a competition in a way, whether it is a 5-10-5 versus each other, or it's in a more open dynamic setting to where they have to make decisions based on the person in front of them. So that's the way we can make those movement patterns that I was talking about.
It's a little more game-like.
A little bit more game-like, a little bit more like, and those kids, they
want to compete.
They want to compete, man. And it's so like in my face. It's like, I feel like before early on, it's like, oh, I want to value the weight room, like the barbells, the dumbbells. It's like, yes, like weak athletes are going to get worked on the field no matter how skilled they are, because they just don't have the same strength. They just don't have the same ability to produce, transfer, and then you consensually use that force. So at some point, like, a weight room will, fill that bucket up and bring them up there. But at the same time, like even look at like track and field as an example. I remember when I was at Rutgers, a kid sumoed 500 pounds, and I was like, what? Like, sumoed 500 pounds, and he weighed like 175 to 180 pounds.
Yeah.
And he was a long jumper. And I'm like, I talked to him, like, dude, like, that was awesome, man. Like, that was sick. Like, but he was hurt last year. He was hurt the year before. Like, he never did like a traditional strength and conditioning program. He was never like a meathead.
Right.
But like through the sport, through explosive jumping, high sprinting velocities, he was able to do that. And that's why I think like the field and the change of direction and the agility drills do serve a very high purpose for developing athletes that I think can be overlooked in a lot of situations.
Yeah, you gotta train fast. They always say you can't get fast unless you run fast.
100%.
But I think that competitive nature is huge in a lot of development of, like, I ended up getting fast because I was tired of being slower than my friends, So like I would suck at tag, I would suck at hide and go seek, I would suck at flag football. It's like, okay, well, they're all fast. I'm going to try and run faster. And I did it really poorly for a long time. But eventually I figured it out, type of thing. But that competitive side, humans are just competitive and they want to be better than the person that's above them. Am I ever going to be better than Mike Trout? No. But, if I join a summer league team, I can try and be better than the person, who's getting more innings than me or whatever. Right. And that's going to drive a little bit of development, in the athlete themselves. And it's going to, really lift the ship of the team. Right. Because if everyone gets a little bit better, the team gets a little bit better.
Exactly. And I think competition definitely increases the speed at which you have to produce movement. So if you're just doing like the speed in a weight room versus the speed in a competition off the field, like on the field, is like drastic difference.
Huge.
I think we forget about, like, for example, I played volleyball the other day or a couple of weeks ago, and I haven't hit the ball overhand anything above my head, like with that velocity of movement, in years. I'll tell you right now, my shoulder hurts. My shoulder hurts just because of how fat, like my body wasn't used to the speed at which I was trying to produce that force. So it's like, oh, wow. It's like, this makes sense. Because if like we're always training our athletes in a slower manner, like when they get to a game and they're trying to prepare for a game or they're in a game and they're competing, it's like, we haven't trained at this velocity all year. So like, hopefully that team isn't that good, So I think training at higher velocities is something that needs to be taken into consideration.
And that's specificity.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
You got to train at the specific movements, and you got to train at the specific speeds, that are going to be required. We had when I was at Get Fast in St. Charles, we had a kid. He trained his butt off for 8 months for the volleyball team. He didn't make it. We were a little confused, and like, hey, you've been practicing volleyball, right? He's like, oh no, I've just been training here. It's like, well, you need to do some volleyball stuff too. Like, being strong and fast doesn't automatically make you better volleyball, baseball, football. It helps, but it doesn't get you to throw 90 miles an hour.
You have to practice your sport as well.
Yeah. Awesome.
Early similarities of it too.
Yeah. Any final thoughts, any final ideas before we start to wrap this up?
No, I enjoyed this. Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Awesome.
Fun. This was a good
well,
time.
before we cut it off, I got 3 lightning questions for you. Oh. All right. So the first one, I hate this question as a strength and conditioning professional, but I'm going to pose it to you. If you could only pick one lift and its variations to do the rest of your life, what would it be? So like, for example, if you were to pick the bench press, you could do incline, decline, floor press, like the variations.
Mm-hmm.
What would your one exercise for life be?
Probably, I used to not like it, but my knees and my hips are starting to hurt a lot more. But I say squat, just something about like locking into the bar, something about squatting I just love to do. So it'd be squatting.
Awesome. I kind of thought you would say that. It was like 70% squat, 30% bench. Like
the bench was a close one. Bench was a close one.
What is your go-to cheat dessert?
Yeah, back a couple months ago, it was a breakfast dessert. I guess you can say it was French toast with syrup. So that was 3 slices of French toast, bunch of syrup. That was a go-to.
You're not gonna put any ice cream or anything on it?
No ice cream on it. No, no ice cream. But it was the French toast. The French toast was like a go-to breakfast, and I had it before bed too. So it was like an all-day meal. I wouldn't even call it.
I mean, breakfast for dinner is never a bad idea.
Yeah,
everyone knows that. All right, final question. If you could be a member of any sports team in history, which team would it be, and why?
I'm obviously from the suburbs of Chicago. I would pick those Bulls dynasty eras, not just to win championships, but I think I would want Michael Jordan to call me out on stuff I'm not doing right. Like, I think that's one of the biggest ways I've grown is like, hey, you are doing this wrong, and this is what's preventing us as a team to get better, and you're holding us back because you're doing X, Y, and Z. And I would love for him to just be like, Matt, if you're not going to fucking compete, sorry for swearing, if you're not going to compete, if you're not going to do this, if you're not going to work this much harder, if you're lacking here, I need you to pick it up. And I think that would be – it's kind of a selfish reason, but at the same time, it's like, okay, wow, I'm not perfect. I know I'm not perfect, but someone has at least the honesty and the decency to tell me, hey, you need to pick it up in this area.
I like the reasoning. It's not, I don't think many people would give that reason. It's like, I just want Michael Jordan to tell me what I suck at. Yeah, I don't think
from that documentary, like, he was just calling everybody. I was like, yo, call me out. Like, what am I doing wrong here?
Yeah, I love it. That's awesome. All right. Any final thoughts, any words of wisdom to any of your athletes, or interns or anything that may be listening to this?
Read books. Read books. Read.
Read books.
And read and have an open mind.
Read books, have an open mind. I love it. All right. So let's Matt, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate, your friendship. You've made me a better coach. And I think you're destined, to be one of the top strength coaches in the nation. I may be biased, but
Thank you.
It's truly awesome every time I get to talk to you.
Awesome. No, thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
All right, man. I'll talk to you later.
Have a great day.
Peace.
Bye.